Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Pillay with another maths lesson for you. This week we're looking at number, and today we're looking at identifying, representing and estimating numbers using different representations. Now you may use this video for today and tomorrow's lesson. So numbers can be represented in many different ways. We're going to look at each of the different ways together. The first way we're going to look at is the tens frame. Now, it's quite easy to draw a tens frame. Just make sure that you have 10 blocks in each frame, and this makes it easier when you are counting it. In the first one on the left-hand side, I see I've got one completed frame, which tells me I've got 10. And then the second one is not completed, so I count and I see I've got 5 ones, which gives me 1 10 and 5 ones, which says 10 plus 5 is 15. If I look at the frame on the right-hand side, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 completed frames, which tells me I've got 4 tens, which is 40, and 3 ones in the incomplete frame, which tells me I've got 3 ones, which is 3, and that gives me a total of 43. The next representation we're looking at is base 10. Now these are called base 10 apparatus. These are what we use at school. And if you don't have these at home, it's quite easy to use lots of other things, which we will talk about. Now, these large blocks are called the hundreds. And because they have 100 centimeter blocks on each one. The long ones are called tens, and they have 10 centimeter blocks on each one. And the little ones is 1 centimeter blocks, and we call those the ones. Now, if I want to look at the first number, I got 256. I've got 200s, got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 10, 5 tens, which is 50, gives me 256. And then I've got 6 ones, which give me my number of 256. At the bottom end, I've got 1, 2, 300, and then I've got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. And then I count my ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, which gives me 364. The next representation we're going to look at is the place value grid. Now, we've got hundreds, we've got tens, and we've got ones. I'm going to use the number 345. And if you remember, I told you that your ones digit always stands at the end of your number. Tens is right next to the ones, and your hundred stands next to the tens. You need to be really careful about how you place the digits on your place value grid. Now, if I look at 345 and I place it on the grid, I can expand that. So the 300s that I've got there, I can make it into 300. My 4 tens, I make it into 40 because 4 tens is 40. And 5 ones is 5, and that makes 345. The next model we're going to look at is a part-whole model. Now this helps us to partition numbers and helps us to add 2- and 3-digit numbers. So I'm going to look at the whole of 37. So I've got 37, and I can partition that into 2 parts, which is 30 plus 7. If I look at 23, I partition that whole into 2 parts, which is 20 plus 3. Now, it's really important to note that you can partition numbers into different combinations of tens and ones, not just one alone. So if I look at 48, I partitioned it into 40 plus 8, but I've also partitioned it into 30 plus 18. And at the bottom, you can see I've done it further, and I've done 20 plus 28. You choose a number and see how many different combinations of tens and ones you can make. The last representation we're looking at here is tallies. So how do we get to school? And if you remember when we talked about tallies, when you see a group like this, we know it's 5. So I don't have to count every single one. I can just say I've got 5, 6, 7 children that walk to school. If there's no line through it, I've got to count each one. So that's 1, 2, 3 children take a bike. 1, 2, 3, 4 children go by car. But if I look at the bus, children that travel by bus, I say 5, 10, 11, 12. That makes it so much easier to count on. Now, another representation you could use at home could be 10p and 1p coins, because your 10p's represent your tens in the 2-digit number, and your 1p coin represents the ones. So let's see how we're going to count this up. For the first one, I've got 10, 11. Second, I've got 10, 11, 12, 13. Then I've got 10, 20, 21, 22. Now, it's really important to make sure that transition, when you're counting from the tens to the ones, you don't forget you're not counting in tens still, you're moving over to the ones. So we count 10, 20, 30, 31. 10, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 10, 20, 30, 31, 32, 33. You can practice those at home. It really helps with counting on quickly. And numbers can also be represented as we know it as numerals. These are numerals. But we can also represent it as words. It's really important for you to learn the words of all the numerals. Write it down, practice the spellings. I've also included on this sheet 1,000, 1 million, and 1 billion. And that's just for interest, so you can see how many zeros we have in those numbers. You can practice writing them too. Now, looking at all the different representations we have, we are going to look at one number. I've chosen number 37. You could do it with me, and you could choose a different number. So using the tens frame, I know I've got 3 tens. So if I look at my tens frame, I've got 1, 2, 3 tens, and then I've got 7 ones. So that makes 37. If I use base 10, I still see that I've got 3 tens and 7 ones. In my place value grid, I've got no hundreds because it's a 2-digit number. I've got 3 tens and 7 ones, which makes 30 and 7, which still gives me 37. If I use the part whole model, I can see I've got my whole is 37, and I've partitioned it into 2 parts, 30 plus 7. I could have done 20 plus 17 if I wanted. If I look at my tally, I can count 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 36, 37. And then, of course, the last thing I want you to remember is always write it out in words. And I can see the words say 37. Have you tried a number of your own? Have a go and do another number as well. Now, another way numbers are represented is on a 100 square. And we've looked at 100 squares at school as well. So when we're looking for a number on a 100 square, I want you to first go right to the top, the first row, look across for the ones digit in your number. So if I'm looking at 37, I'm looking at the 7 is my ones digit. I'm going across and I find 7. And if I go down, I can find my number that I'm looking for. So I'm not searching all over the 100 square. If I do 64, I'm looking at my one says 4. So I looked for 4 and I go down until I find 64. That's an easy way to find a number, 2-digit number on a 100 square. The final representation I want to show you is representing numbers on a number line. Now remember, we can have numbered number lines like the first one. We can have number lines where all the divisions or intervals are shown in the second one. Or we can just have a blank number line where we will have to estimate where we think the number needs to be. Number lines could also have different start and end numbers, so we need to look carefully at these before we position numbers on a number line. For instance, if we look at the last number line here, it doesn't start from 0, it starts from 50 and it ends at 70. But then my first one on this slide shows starts at 0, ends at 20. The second one starts at 0 and ends at 10. So we need to look at all of these very, very carefully. Now let us fill in some missing numbers on these numbered number lines. So again, as I said, look at your start and end number. So I need to look at two numbers standing together, which will help me to work out what the steps are that my numbers are in. So the two I've got together is 6 and 7. So I know if I count 6 to 7, that's one step. So I know my number should be in ones. So I've got 0, my next number will be 1, yes. Then 2, what's the next number? Have a go and fill in the first number line. Think about what it could be. Right, did you get all the numbers correct? Let's have a look at the second number line. Now this starts from 10. We don't have an end number, but we've got two numbers that stand together. So we've got 10 and 11. So we need to think about what numbers are they going up in. And I know that it's going up in ones. So you have a go at filling in the second number line. Did you manage to work it out correctly? Have a check with mine. And then let's have a look at the next one. Now I don't have a start number, but I've got 22. I've got 24 and 25, which tells me it's going up in ones. So what number stands before 22? Yes, 21. And what's in front of 21? Have a go and fill in the rest of the numbers. Right, check yours against mine. Have you got all of yours correct? I'm sure you have. That one was quite easy because we're just going up in steps of 1. Now, let's look at this number line. We got 0 to 20. I've got all the numbers in there. Then I've got a blank one that starts at 0 and ends at 20 as well. But I've got an arrow with a missing number there. What number do you think comes into that space? How do we know what number is going to be there? So we can see that the arrow is pointing halfway on the number line, and we know that half of 20 is 10. So we know the missing number there is 10. Now remember, not all number lines end at 20. So this number line ends at 40. What number is the arrow pointing to now? How can we work it out? Is the red arrow in the middle of the number line? Don't think so. So let's have a look at what could the middle number be. So first we're going to find halfway. And my blue arrows tell me that halfway is 20 because half of 40 is 20. So we've got that. Now, does that make it a little bit easier to find out what the red arrow is pointing to? Is halfway between 0 and 20? Have a think and let's have a look. Yes, it is. It's exactly halfway. So we know between 0 and 20, 10 is halfway. So it makes it really easy to put your halfway points in to help you. Now we've got a number line that starts at 30 and ends at 50. And we want to find out what number is the green arrow pointing to. So first we're looking at the start and end numbers. And we know, we circled it, we've got 30 at the start and 50 as the end number. Number 2, we need to think about the halfway point. Remember, I said always look for the halfway mark and work out which number it will be. So which number is halfway between 30 and 50? We know that it's 40. Now when we look at the number line, we can now see that the green arrow is halfway between 30 and 40. Have to think about what that could be. So we know that 35 is halfway between 30 and 40. So the number the green arrow is pointing to is 35. Now let us look at another number line, which has a different start and end numbers. Here the start number is 50 and the end number is 100. Look carefully and you will notice that the arrow is not in the middle. So what would the middle number be? Let's find that out first. So the number which is halfway between 50 and 100 is 75. So which number is indicated by the green arrow? It's slightly more than halfway. But we can't see exactly where each number would be on the number line. So we'll need to estimate the position of the number indicated by the green arrow, which means have a really good guess at it. To help us, we know that the halfway mark is 75. We need to fill in a few other numbers to help us. So I'll put in a few arrows in there. And let us think about what those arrows could be. So I've chosen to fill in the multiples of 10 on the number line to help me. So I've got 60, 70, and I could put 19. What do you notice about the third yellow arrow and the green arrow? Yes, it's directly across each other. So what would that number be? So we can see that the number which the green arrow is pointing to is 80. Now remember, when you look at numbers which are represented in different ways, look carefully at each digit to understand what each digit represents. And look carefully at the start and end numbers on the number line when you're filling in the missing numbers. Maybe you could work with a member of your family and see who can be the fastest at representing a number in many different ways. I hope you now have a better understanding of the different ways in which numbers can be represented. Take care, stay safe, and until next time, keep learning hard.